How are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into the SFS channel here in our top 20 tight end tiers and rankings for Week 15 fantasy football. Obviously, playoff time, crunch time here for your seasons. We're going to be breaking down, again, the top 20 tight ends that I see here for this week's games, despite the fact that there is a very variable presence to these players this year, and it's a very sporadic, inconsistent level of production. So we're going to sift through that as best as we possibly can. If there's any sort of accuracy to this list, it would actually quite surprise me, because this has been such a tough and difficult position to assess throughout this season. So we're going to break all that stuff down in today's video, though. We're going to talk through this. This shouldn't be a too terribly long episode, and we're actually going to dive right in right now. So clear alone at the top of the mountain here is Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's coming off of some underwhelming games by his standards, but if you look at him, he has an insanely large gap between him and the next best player this year. So with Patrick Mahomes and him being his clear number one target, it's really no discussion, no question, no debate. Travis Kelce has been on a different level of productivity to this point in the year. All right, this tier is actually quite large, so I do want to start out with George Kittle here and actually break down this matchup, because if you're a George Kittle owner, you're going to see him tonight, actually. This video is coming out on Thursday morning. I'm recording it Wednesday evening, and we actually just got some news about Dallas Goedert, that he has had his practice window opened up to return off of the injured reserve. So I'm not actually going to guarantee he plays, but I did figure that I need to talk about him because the likelihood of you starting him, should he play, is fairly high this week. So George Kittle, starting out here, is a player against Seattle this week without Deebo Samuel. Seattle, actually, if you look back to the start of the season when they lost Jamal Adams right away in the year, that was their tight end defender, and they have really struggled against that position since. And obviously, George Kittle is obviously, one of the best receiving tight ends, but all around as a holistic player, he might be the most complete tight end the league has right now. So what we also saw this past week is Brock Purdy feeding him the rock, getting him a lot of looks right off the line of scrimmage. Quarterbacks, especially young ones, love that security and safety blanket in the tight end position, and having someone at such a high level like a George Kittle is one hell of an asset for a guy like Brock Purdy entering into his second career start here. And again, he could see an upward tick of his usage and volume here without Deebo in the lineup. Mark Andrews, this one is an absolute stinker. Should Tyler Huntley not be cleared of concussion protocol, you got to slide him down. If Anthony Brown's the quarterback, they're just going to try to not pass the whole game. But for Mark here, it's so hard. I'm getting so frustrated right now, and it's crazy that he's a tight end 3 for me still. But I'm getting really frustrated watching the Ravens offense. I feel like every time red zone flicks back to them, you're seeing Josh Oliver on the field. You're seeing Isaiah Likely. You're seeing Charlie Kohler. You're seeing guys that aren't named Mark Andrews, or if he's on the field, I feel like he's being targeted at a much lower frequency and clip this season than he has been in years past. And I think that part of that's a Lamar Jackson problem. Part of that is that the defense game plans to stop Mark Andrews, because without Rashad Bateman and Hollywood Brown in the offense this year, they do not have respectable playmakers. So sad, unfortunate. The floor is through the floor. It sucks. It's terrible. But we have to deal with it here. TJ Hockenson, arguably, you could very much make the argument, and again, as I said, should Tyler Huntley be out for this week, I'll go right ahead and slide TJ Hockenson, maybe even Dalton Schultz, ahead of Mark Andrews here. But since landing in Minnesota, and yes, he is a Viking, there is not a picture that I could find that has the file formatting that I needed to get him into this video. So in a Vikings jersey, he looks pretty funny in that, because his hair and his beard have gotten even bigger since that photo he took there of the Lions. But regardless here, TJ's been fairly reliable. His ceiling hasn't been exquisite every single week, but he's had some semblance of a floor the majority of the time. At the end of the day, he is a solid red zone weapon for this team. He's had a couple of costly drops that have left fantasy points on the table as well. So things to keep in mind there. Dalton Schultz, he looks finally healthy. He's got Jacksonville this week. Dak Prescott loves him as a safety blanket and kind of an insurance option for him. If his first and second read aren't open, he just sits down in the middle of the field, sits into that soft spot in the zone, catches the ball, gets upfield, and gets moving. Hopefully he can continue to produce here. And then, as I said, Dallas Goedert, who is a really big piece of the RPO game for the Philadelphia Eagles prior to his injury. It was a shoulder, nothing too significant. I believe it was just 4 weeks in the IR, and he is right back off this thing now. Again, we'll see see if he plays here. If he does, it probably is at a discounted snap count percentage. Keep that in mind here, but he's still clearly better than the majority of options we would have in leagues. All right, the tight end 6 through 9 here, starting with David Njoku. Now, I talked about this in the quarterbacks episode, but what we did see in a report this week is that Cleveland wants to push the ball downfield a little bit more. That could potentially be a benefit for David Njoku. Now, he's not some field stretcher, but he can work the deep middle, I should say, of the field on deep crossing routes. He can run, obviously, kind of a skinny post or something up the middle of the field. So we'll see what he does. He's a really good weapon in the red zone. He had a 22% target share in his first ever game with Deshaun Watson, who has really liked tight ends dating back to his time in Houston. So obviously a much more talented player than he had access to in any of that time in his career. So really liking his outlook. Pat Freiermuth here is a did not practice designation for Wednesday. I do not like that. His foot is injured right now. That caused him to slip a little bit down the tiers today. He is pretty solid in terms of his floor usage now. Obviously, Pittsburgh's offense is really hit or miss, and Kenny Pickett's in concussion protocol. I do think that it's fine with Trubisky here. Nonetheless, he's still a top 10 tight end for me, obviously, here at my tight end 7 position. But do be wary of that foot injury, as it could impact his not only his availability, of course, but his effectiveness should he be out there. Greg Dulcich, we'll see what happens with the potential for Brett Rippon to be the starting quarterback. But man, Russ peppers this guy in targets. If you watch the Chiefs game, and his tape is really good. He flies off the line of scrimmage, gets out of his breaks really fast. It surprised me how impressive he has been at actually looking like a weapon for this offense. He is a guy that makes things happen. And like I said, he was missed on a few passes last week. There's a few times he was just wide open and didn't get the target. Like, I'd watch him release off the line of scrimmage. Part of the reason I'm watching him so closely, if you're wondering how I have all this information on film that you obviously can't see because I would get a copyright claim. But basically, I was playing against him last week in a very important game of mine, so I was glued into that game, and especially Greg Dulcich, his production. Scary guy to watch. His ceiling someday could be pretty good here. But again, quarterback play is going to play a big factor in his production here should Russ be out in concussion protocol. Not so sure that his floor or ceiling is nearly as good as expected. Evan Ingram here, craziness last week, had the game of his career, jumped from the tight end 16 in scoring to the tight end 4 in total fantasy points for the year. He's athletic, he's a playmaker, he's a savvy veteran, and his quarterback is playing on another level right now in terms of where we've seen Trevor Lawrence play in the past. He has taken a jump. I don't know if it is the jump. I think he can still get to another gear and dynamic, but high-level football is being played in Jacksonville right now from Trevor Lawrence, and of course that trickles down to his tight end position. All right, so here's my tight ends 10 through 15. Realistically, I feel like you probably don't want to be starting any of these guys. That shows how weak the back end of the tight end position is this year. I feel like last year the tight end spot was a lot more productive and reliable. I felt like a lot of teams were utilizing that position at a high level. And this season, it's been incredibly frustrating. I mean, look at a guy like Dawson Knox, who's in this tier that last year would have been arguably in the A tier with the touchdown rate that he was putting out there. So for Gerald Everett here starting out this tier, he's got Tennessee this week. The one knock I have on Gerald Everett is he was fairly inconsistent when he was arguably the second non-Austin Eckler pass catcher in this offense, the time early in the season. Now that you've got Keenan Allen back and Mike Williams, you've got yourself also Austin Eckler, arguably Josh Palmer. I don't know why I'm like double putting the hands up here, but you've got a variety of names here that are notches ahead of him in this offense in terms of the hierarchy of distribution of volume and opportunity for production. So his floor has become shakily low. He is extremely unreliable. You need him to score a touchdown to essentially lock in weekly lineup value for you, because you're not looking at a guy who's going to get you 6, 7, 8 targets consistently anymore. Dawson Knox, same thing. I wanted to hang on to the value from last season. Obviously, inflated touchdown numbers are a red flag, but I thought there was some chance that he could sustain it being in a Josh Allen-led offense. Nope, not the case. He's made a few plays here and there. He has scored some touchdowns at points throughout the year, but it's been nowhere nearly as consistent as it was last season, and that's ultimately what you're crossing your fingers and really hoping for in these games. So again, touchdown or bust option. For Cole Kmet, it's a little different. He can make a lot of big plays downfield. He is a really good athlete, and he moves very, very well in space. For Justin Fields, it's about the play action game and getting him some of those deep crossing routes that we talked about with guys like David Njoku. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. Of course, Kmet can make touchdowns happen as well in the red area, but I do think that there is a little bit more added room for production. However, again, the floor is exceptionally low, as it tends to be for these players. Chigoziem Okonkwo, that is an awesome name there. Me and my buddy actually have shares of him like on our bench in a Dynasty Fantasy League, and we just have an absolute ball every time this guy goes out there and makes plays happen. So I've been rooting for this guy behind the scenes for the entire season, but he goes out there and catches, a touchdown or a 2-point conversion last week. And he's athletic. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Jonnu Smith. They're both fairly undersized tight ends. Like, they're not very big guys that look like dominant threats in the red zone. But again, move well, athletic, can be used in versatile ways, and it's fun. So at the end of the day, he's a tight end too. You don't want to be starting him in a redraft league, but there is some upside there. Hunter Henry, we saw a couple of nice plays against the Cardinals. Now they suck at guarding and defending tight ends, but they did allow Henry down the seam a couple of times on Monday Night Football. Not super productive this year, not super reliable. Even the touchdowns, which were usually like a backbone for him in fantasy, have faded a little bit this season. Like I said, it's been a screen-heavy season. Actually, I didn't say that in this video. I said this in the quarterbacks episode, which I filmed before this, so I apologize. I have not said this yet in today's episode or this episode. The Patriots have been attacking the line of scrimmage with their passing game, so you're really limiting your ceiling and upside here without throwing the ball downfield. And then Tyler Conklin has got himself the Detroit Lions this week. It's a poor secondary. It's an exploitable matchup in the pass game. That's really the intrigue here. All right, now so for Taysom Hill here, starting it out in the D tier, this is essentially the player that is the tight end eligible option for fantasy football that actually isn't a tight end. He's a gadget player. We know the drill, Taysom Hill. They're going to run quarterback power. They're going to run some sort of wildcat weirdness. They might throw him a pass or two. But at the end of the day, he is not going to walk out there and be your traditional tight end. So you're hoping that he makes some plays in the passing game, ultimately gets some opportunities, split out wide, and obviously injuries at the tight end position on the Saints team could open up some more opportunities for that, but very, very sporadic and inconsistent production. Tyler Higbee was getting peppered in targets early in the year. That production has dropped off here as of late. Obviously, quarterback play, injuries, teams being able to key in on him a little bit more, all impacts that, but essentially his floor has become pathetically low. There are games that he goes with minimal targets or little to no reception value, so you got to pencil that in and chalk that up as a possibility. Cade Otton, a guy who I really like here, would like to see him get more involved in Tampa's offense. Again, super inconsistent role here. He catches big passes in big spots of the game, but the volume isn't enough, and the offensive production level isn't enough to consistently pencil him in as a weekly starter. He's actually a very low-end starter for me because he might only get a few passes per game, and that's just the reality of the situation. This team goes 3 and out far too often. They don't move the ball down the field consistently, so there just isn't enough opportunities for him to be highly successful, but the talent is there that potentially one day he might be that type of player. Noah Fant, super versatile, super athletic, I think he's a good player and prospect. However, again, Seattle likes to run themselves some Will Dissly into the offense. They have got Colby Parkinson in there as well. It's kind of a tight end. It's not quite a tight end committee offense, but it's a multi-tight end set or frequently subbing guys in and out of the game. So his floor is, trust me, it's rock bottom. But of course, the ceiling is there for him to make some very big plays. I believe there was a game this season where he had like 2 receptions and took one of them up the sideline for a touchdown late, and that made him one of the top tight end producers of that entire week. And then Darren Waller here, he is literally on the list because right before I started recording this episode, he got designated for the 21-day return window. Again, kind of like Dallas Goedert, we don't know if he's actually going to play. Now, the reason I have Dallas, the discrepancy between the two players in situations coming off the IR, Dallas for me is coming back off of a short-term minor injury off of his minimum 4-week sentence on the IR. Boom, coming right back. Darren Waller feels like he's been gone the whole year. And yes, he wasn't on IR for that entire time, but he's clearly been going through it with more significant injury stuff. So my lack of confidence, in his health, and just the fact that it was a 21-day practice window that was open for him. Don't really know if he's going to play. We don't know if either of them are going to play, but I'm far less confident in Darren Waller's availability for this week. So there you guys have it. Top 20 tight end tiers and rankings here for Week 15 Fantasy Football. If you enjoyed, smash the like button, subscribe if you're new around here. I appreciate the heck out of all of you, and I will see you in a future episode. Peace out.